I'm so glad I promoted Colleen after I severed her obligations, or rather, her obligations are paid in full. So she's no longer under any obligation. I'm so glad I'm watching my Colleen self because that fits the same pattern as September 11th, doesn't it? There were all of those bills that President Trump signed on January 5th, many of them, more than 20. He actually signed them into law. There were different time frames during which Congress had passed them. They got to him. He signed them all on January 5th. Then we had what happened on January 6th. Now, if you were prudent and you were looking for some sort of potential evidence that the president might have done something to aid whatever would be considered anything illegal about what happened on January 6th, then you would be looking at something like that. But here's the thing, Congress passed all of those bills, and Congress was already aware of time frames connected to when they passed the bills, right? When they put them up for the final vote and they agreed to pass them, and then when they sent them to the president. So they would also know about how they strategically coordinated it to traffic his family, including in connection with something having to do with sexual health risk, right? So they would already know that. And it's one of those things where when you're talking about exculpatory evidence versus other kinds of evidence, these things come up, right? But I mention that because what happened January 6th? Yes. So January 1st, this goes into effect. Then there's January 10th, 10 days later, which is an XCOM. I call it XCOM. Executive compensation. There's specific terms around 10 days related to executive compensation. And then there's January 11th, kind of like September 11th. Except nobody's acknowledged what January 11th of 2021 was, because nobody acknowledged what January 11th of 2020 was. Nobody had the authority. Nobody had the authority to do anything, just like Mike Pence, right? The president, the Senate, the vice president, he didn't have the authority. And what happened when he didn't have the authority? Who had the authority? And you want to impeach the president because the people who had the authority demonstrated their authority. I see. What happened on January 11th? Because that was their responsibility. And you know what happened? They intentionally defaulted and a bunch of stuff got stolen. Bunch. Stuff got stolen. Has it already been sold? Because I think if I'm correct, you're not going to be getting paid until the 21st, are you? Yeah, that's 2 days away. Let me continue. Covering the head one way or another, I've been told, is an important distinction. This reminds me of information regarding the death of Attorney General Joseph Biden III. He apparently died at a hospital, but it wasn't at Walter Reed, was it? This was very important. He received treatment at the Army hospital, but that's not where he died. He died somewhere else. And he had previously received treatment in the state of Texas. This is interesting to me because it's understood and was publicly acknowledged that when he returned from Iraq, where he was serving his reserve duty, that his father met him and the people he was returning with at the airport. His father was on site when he returned from Iraq. This is very important, isn't it? I don't know if I can remember all of them off the top of my head. There was Chandrasekhar. He was a Nobel Prize winning physicist from the University of Chicago. This would be number 2, but the first I was conscious of. He was murdered in July of 1995. July or August of 1995. Before him was John Parnell Walker. And that was, I believe, August of 1993 or 1994. But I wasn't aware of him until later. I knew something at the time, I didn't know what it was until later. Then there was Yasser Arafat, but I didn't even understand that really until November of 2016. After that, so far as I recall, there was Nimr al-Nimr. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, which was in January or February of 2016. After that, or actually before that, was Miguel Facusa, which was June or July of 2015. I was aware of, these are the ones I was aware of at the time it happened. I'm giving the time frames. Miguel Facusa was June or July of 2015. They were very sad that day. Then there was Nimr al-Nimr, January, February 2016. Then there was Shimon Peres in September of 2016. It's sometime over the summer. There was a man, I cannot say his name, I do not know how to say it. He was the king of Thailand. This was a little different, but there was him. And then after that, who was after that? Well, there was David Rockefeller, but I don't know. He's like the king of Thailand. I can't say that they were murdered so much as they erred and were held responsible in a manner different than the other ones. But they may well have been considered murdered the same as the others. I don't think so, though. Theirs was not a strategically coordinated, identified, premeditated act of potential execution of a terminal hedge in order to silence their dissent. This was different. But after that, what was there after that? Things came later from there. After that, who else was there? Barbara Bush in April of 2018. After Barbara Bush, then I realized about Beau Biden. I did not have any awareness of that until after the situation with Barbara Bush. Then there were others more recently. There was David Koch. There was Ross Perot. There was Boone Pickens, who I did not know about before. There was a man who was identified as the public defender of India that is no longer available online. There was a man who was a former identified as dictator in Africa, I believe Rwanda. This was maybe August of 2019. These were strategic. See, what they wanted is with Shimon Peres, his 3rd anniversary of his murder came, nobody talked to me. So there was no conveyance. Somebody wanted to declare it had been abandoned so that then they could claim it. But in order for them to do that, there was a series of events that had to happen because they wanted the claiming of his estate to have a certain kind of characterization, as if somebody else was going to supplant it while they vested his estate. And so it was supposed to go one way, and it ended up going differently. And by the way, Simon's a little bit off the record right now. You can't get him. He's a different situation. Whatever's going on with the others. Barbara's gone. You're never going to get anything from Barbara. You guys did not do what you needed to do. Barbara's gone. She did that herself. But the others, they all have their own circumstances. Who was after this? Then there was Elijah Cummings, who was not supposed to be Elijah Cummings. That was supposed to be someone else. This year, there's been Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Which then brings up the fact that in 2016 there was also Antonin Scalia. So all of these people were murdered. In one manner or another, somebody wanted them dead. And I think the reason that I am haunted by them and have been allowed to be ostracized or whatever is because they are known to be murdered. And the mischaracterization of the circumstances around their deaths is so significant that there is an etheric and karmic ramification. It's not even about whether you like them. They might have been assholes. They might have been wonderful people if you actually got to know them beyond the political context. The point of the matter is they were strategically murdered. And somebody wanted their murders to be misrepresented as some kind of medical ailment. Because what happened in the processes of harvesting them at the end of their lives allowed for somebody else to be able to access their estate. And part of it was an understanding that there would be a certain period of time that would be able to commence where it was held in some limbo. And then if it wasn't claimed, then somebody else, if it hadn't been charged that they'd been murdered, somebody else thought they could capture it and that they could claim it for themselves, rework it after it had been mischaracterized. This was the intent. They're diamonds. Somebody wanted the diamonds. They wanted the diamonds for themselves. And so then the concept of, well, what happens when you liquidate diamonds like that and you don't acknowledge the correct death? What's allowed to accrue? What can you do with that? How many diamonds do you have to murder and get away with it before you can what? How significantly can you alter the course of global events if you refuse to acknowledge they were murdered? And they were murdered in hospitals, by and large. Some of them were executed. I think Nimram Nimro, he was executed. Say what you will about execution as murder. But the understanding is these were political murders that were aimed at accomplishing long-term political agendas, including political engineering, that correlated with an intent to eliminate certain kinds of political possibilities from the political landscape. These were political murders. Why? How long do you intend to allow this to occur? Because here's the thing. If they were culprits and you adjudged, well, they deserve to die. And not only do they deserve to die, we deserve to be able to claim their estate, restitution or reparations. You didn't charge them. You didn't charge them. You didn't try them. You murdered them. And when you murder them and you get away with it, then all you do is give coverage to other murderers to get away with murder. And what does it do for the rest of us that live under threat and fear of murder? Our family members were murdered. Our leaders were murdered. Our lovers were murdered. Our mothers were murdered. You thought what? That you would just get some people in their little scrubs as uniforms to murder them on the inside? And then what, were you going to give them a bonus? Were you going to completely destroy the planet and centralize everything into an apparatus that would valorize them and their contributions to covering up your murders? Because that's what it seems happened. If you don't prosecute their murders, what leverage or coverage do the rest of us have to protect ourselves in trying to avoid our own? Well, even if you thought that all of those suicides that had denied you a political possibility in terms of a particular manner of being, what do you have now? See, the problem is until you murder me, you don't actually get to collect. It's a problem, isn't it? You got the fraud. You got the vacancy of any sort of coverage for an alternative in the refusal to prosecute them to begin with. If you judged that they were worthy of prosecution. But you didn't charge them. You didn't bring charges. And so what you've got is a clog in the pipeline. And I have absolutely no intention of relinquishing whatever I have that would allow for it to be bestowed to or through you. It doesn't matter how long you kidnap me or how much nonsense you feed me with the only oxygen mask I'm allowed to have access to. You're not going to get them. They're not yours. If they were public leaders and they were in the public trust, then they belong to the people from whence they came. If there were crimes associated with that, their people have a right to be able to redeem themselves. You're not going to get them. You have no right. But in the meantime, what you've done is created a huge fraud and a huge bankruptcy on so many other levels. Is this why you didn't want to talk to me? Is this why you wanted to keep Colleen as a 15-year-old girl having her hormones milked while she's being sexually tortured? Wow. Very, very, very bad